All right, here we go. The AFC North Whiparound comes to life, to real life. Here we all are as faces, not just names on a page. We're supposed to have an AFC North feel, right? It stays the same forever, and it's always supposed to feel like we know what we're getting. Well, we don't know what we're getting anymore in the AFC North because everything has changed since we last have talked. Everybody has new coaches. Well, I don't have anybody new to talk to, but you guys all do. Everything feels different. Jeff Zrebiec, Mike DeFabo, Zac Jackson. How are we doing, boys?
We're good. I think this is a good idea. I enjoy working with you guys all the time, but everybody's been kind of doing their own thing. The only issue here is my podcast is called Zac Jackson and Friends, and you guys are definitely not really my friends. There are no friends in the AFC North. So.
Enemies only.
Yes.
I'm sure you were expecting Paul to be the one guy who didn't have a coaching search this offseason, huh?
Yep, that's it. That's it. You just used to assume this is what it was going to be. Although I actually kind of did. I wrote in the Whiparound that nothing was actually more on brand than what the Browns and the Bengals did this offseason. Like it was kind of both teams playing to their reputations a little bit. You guys are different. I just want to start with to me, what was the biggest changes, and that's what happened in Baltimore and Pittsburgh. Mike, I'll start with you. What was your surprise level, and what's been the fallout in Pittsburgh as the Tomlin thing has landed and Mike McCarthy's now here?
I mean, as the season went on, I did start to wonder, how much longer does Mike Tomlin want to do this? Because any coach is going to face criticism, calls for their job, but it reached a tipping point in week 13 when fans were chanting to fire Tomlin. But still, I just thought, this guy is a coaching lifer. All he knows is football. They're going to have to drag him out by his feet to get him out of this building. There's no way he's walking out on his own. So on the Thursday before, Diana Rossini, our colleague at The Athletic, sent me a message and was like, hey, I'm hearing this is going to happen. Get your pre-write ready. He is stepping down. And I started asking people around the building, what do you think about this? And from 4 or 5 people, I got you're wasting your time, man, laughing at me. I can't believe you've got to waste your time doing a pre-write. There's no way Tomlin is stepping down. And then sure enough, it happened. So I had an indication, or I had an inkling that maybe this could be real and he finally could be reaching his tipping point. But until it actually happened, I didn't really think it was going to.
Yeah, so in Cleveland, we used to do this every 6 months with the coaching change. So to go 6 years was different. I do think the last month of the season, it was a given. I think even Kevin Stefanski accepted that. The offense just stunk. The team just stunk. So the surprise was that the GM got to stay because the vibe is that head coach was the scapegoat, right? And there's a lot that has gone wrong, and much of it, not all of it, but much of it can be traced to Deshaun Watson, who, by the way, still has to be on the roster because they can't afford to cut him. That's the reality of it. So there's this awkward vibe because a long, drawn-out coach search followed, and it landed on Todd Monken, who really hadn't interviewed anywhere else, who had worked in the building for 1 year before, but it was a miserable experience, and has, just never been a head coach. So that was weird. And then there was a long defensive coordinator thing, and everybody's arguing about quarterbacks, and no one knows where it's going to go. So here are the Browns. Probably could have been better. Certainly have a good defense. Certainly have some pieces that are as good as anybody's in this division or elsewhere, but really are facing a complete offensive remake. The fan base has apathy, I think, over anger, over anything else. And there's just huge questions. So it's like Myles Garrett could set the record again, and young players could develop again, and they could be in 4th place again. So we're really just anxious to see, because there are a number of different ways that it can go. We've really had not much exposure to Todd Monken. So this kind of going to the combine and then immediately going to March and all the movement really does mark a new period for the Browns. But a lot of it just kind of still feels the same, and there's not a lot of optimism.
Yeah, I can't say I was shocked that John Harbaugh is no longer the Ravens coach. Over the last month of the season, whenever he was asked about his job security, there was a calmness about Harbaugh's responses and understanding why the questions are being asked. And that's never been the case. He can be a bit edgy, particularly when you question him about certain stuff. And the way he was answering questions told me, in his head, it seems like he's prepared that this could be it. And yet, with all the speculation down the stretch, not once did anyone from the organization, whether it was for background or on the record, come out and say, you know what, you guys are wasting your time speculating about John Harbaugh's future. Not once did anyone come forward and say he's not going anywhere. So I think the speculation started a little bit when they started 1-5. Then they stabilized a little, and we're kind of like, if they come back from become like the fourth team in history since the merger to make the playoffs after going 1-5, he probably saved himself. And then even when they lost in Pittsburgh, you're kind of like, you know what, I'm not sure, but it was clear things were not right all year with the dynamic between Harbaugh, Lamar Jackson, Todd Monken, quarterback coach T. Martin. It was just off. It just felt like the Ravens badly needed a new energy, a new voice, all that stuff. It just felt like, it's kind of, people overuse it, but it felt like it got stale, and it was just time. And when owner Steve Bisciotti, who was kind of on the fence, in the hours after the loss in Pittsburgh, when he started talking, and several players came out and basically said, I think it's time for change too. There's not I think players like John Harbaugh personally. I think they feel like he's a very good football coach, but I think they felt like things had gone as far as they were going to go with him. And if they were going to take another shot at winning a Super Bowl in Lamar Jackson's window, which you don't know how long it's going to be, they need to make immediate and drastic changes in order to give yourself the best opportunity to cash in on that. And thus, I guess the only surprise to me, guys, was the fact that it wasn't a mutual parting. It wasn't like they didn't come together with this announcement. It was straight up, no, you're gone. Didn't even call him or didn't even call him into the building, just fired him over the phone. A guy who's been there for 18 years is going to be in the Ring of Honor and the winningest coach ever. There was no attempt by Steve Bisciotti, owner, to make like this was a mutual thing. He made it very clear that no, it was his decision. It was time for John to go. I was a little surprised how upfront they were about that. I figured they'd have something planned to make it like it was more of a celebration of his career, but we're both moving apart. But no, it was, you're gone. It's time.
It's crazy. I felt like the Ravens were, as close to being the best team in football for a 2-year span there as you can be. And it just shows the NFL how quickly it's changing year to year, and that you go from that to 1 year where you missed Lamar for part of it and all these problems are happening in the background, and it just ends. I don't have to worry about that problem here. You can just keep on cruising along here in Cincinnati with Zac Taylor's he's Will Smith in the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air living room at this point, kind of hanging out like the tenured guy. But because I think they feel like, and we'll see how this plays out, that this can sort of be something that they're being one of the few teams with continuity can be used to their advantage at this point. And the fact that the rest of the North changed probably can augment that, even though it's probably wasn't the design in the first place, in that they can start fast. They do have a whole offense that's back with the same OC and head coach and play caller and Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and they finally settled their line down. They brought their whole coaching. They brought their whole coaching staff back. They didn't even change any of that stuff. It's truly like, this is okay here, and just fix the defense. And I think there's something to be said for that, because the offense has been good. But it was I never felt like Zac Taylor was ever really in question here, despite how loud the calling for his head has been locally and nationally and everything like that. Like, that's never felt like that was the case. He was always going to get a pass because of Burrow's injury, even though they went 1-8 without him. Like, he was going to get a pass, and they know that he has a great relationship with Joe. He has a great relationship with ownership, and he has managed up and down very well in the most important places, and it's helped him stay secure. And he did have the 2 best years that they've ever had around here, and they act like that just happened yesterday and not 4 or 5 years ago, and so they hold on to it. But this is the pressure cooker year, though. Like it really does feel like the big boom of change is on deck if this year doesn't go right, because they feel like their chips are aligned with having year 2 of Al Golden's defense and everybody back on offense and room to go spend. So I'll be curious to see what happens if they don't, because it could really – I'll be in your guys' spot. I'll be the only one with a coaching search, and the three of you guys will have the same head coach if they don't win this division next year, to be honest.
Well,
So where do we go next?
I'll just say this. This is the level of interest / apathy in Cleveland. You know, they finally hired a defensive coordinator last Monday, almost 3 weeks after the head coach was hired. And it was Mike Rutenberg, who really wasn't one of the names that was kind of leaked and has never been a coordinator before. And the next day, the best radio show in town, it was not like singing the praises of this guy or talking about what he can do with Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, and Grant Delpit and Carson Schlesinger. It was, is this staff one and done? Like, that was the question that they're asking.
Which is a fair question.
which is a fair question. And that's not this staff's fault, right? But it's a fair perception. Paul, no exaggeration. I'm covering these games sometimes, and people come up, my colleagues, you guys, or other people who work for other outlets, and they'll be like, "Yeah, this is what it's like, right? This is what you see every week." But that last game in Cincinnati, you know, the Browns were completely ready to lay down and lose by 90 until one tip pass, and then the Bengals just laid down, and then it was like, "Oh, that's what it was like, right?" Like the Bengals could not get out of their own way. It didn't matter who won that game, but the Bengals just spent the entire second half insistent on the other team taking it.
Yes. It was, I mean, that's just sort of, that felt like the lost nature of both of those seasons. I mean, and it was like, because the Bengals, they felt like the momentum once Burrow came back and, you know, Jeff, we saw each other on Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And that was an insanely surprising result. And it felt like, oh, there's real energy behind this Bengals team now. Burrow's back. Like the AFC being what it turned out to be, by the way, you know, all four of these fan bases are sitting here saying, Jesus, and he could have been any one of us if things would have come together, even you, Zach. Well, maybe not, but still, like, it felt like that could be a real thing because of how open everything was. And there was Burrow, and they lose a game in Buffalo that they had in their hands that they shouldn't have lost. And then it ended up being like, okay, they're playing well, nobody cares. And it ended up like that with Cleveland. But here in Cincinnati, it didn't feel like they were far off. Whereas actually, it feels like from what you guys are saying, you guys felt like things were maybe further off than the record would suggest.
Well, what's interesting is, look, I thought the Ravens were flawed all year. Like, I mean, no bones about it. Me and other people, I'm not going to, point fingers because I was involved too. We completely overrated that roster. And Lamar Jackson obviously Lamar Jackson obviously covers a lot of flaws. He wasn't healthy all year. He got hurt pretty much in week 3 and in Kansas City, and it was one injury after the next. And when he's not there to cover your flaws, you're exposed in a lot of ways. So that was one thing. The other thing was they just weren't good enough in the trenches on either offensive or defensive line. They weren't getting the quarterback enough, so their secondary was, left even more vulnerable. So we overrated that roster hard, and I was as guilty as anybody. I didn't think they had the best roster in the league, but I thought they were a top 5 type roster, and we were wrong. But if Tyler Lupe makes that field goal, Mike, I'm not convinced they couldn't have won a couple playoff games. And that's not because I thought they were good. I just thought the rest of the AFC stunk. So it was just and Paul, you mentioned, like, I thought they were done when Burrow threw for all those yards on Thanksgiving night. And then they come back, and what was that, 2 weeks later? And that bad defense shut out Burrow.
24-0
in Cincinnati. So it was just such a crazy year where you saw flashes of it, and you say, you know what, if this team gets hot in this bad conference, you don't know what they could do. They could be one of these teams that squeaks in the playoffs at 9-8 and goes on a little bit of a run. But obviously the Tyler Lupe miss and the loss in Pittsburgh brought about the finality of it. And sort of, they were, even if they had won that game, and Bisciotti has said this, it would have taken a long playoff run for them not to make significant changes. I mean, he made that comment like that game would have saved John Harbaugh's job for 1 week, which was kind of harsh at the time, but you got to respect the honesty.
Where are things at going forward in Pittsburgh now? Like, what's the big offseason question and move besides, I guess, Aaron Rodgers, right? I mean, are you now stuck in Aaron Rodgers hell, Mike, where you have to live with the offseason of will he, won't he, where's he at? Is he, is he in Europe? Is he, in somewhere in a cabin in the woods? Like, what's the status of Aaron Rodgers and how you go forward now at quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, it sure seemed like they were just using him as a one-year bridge when they signed him last year. And even Rodgers said on the Pat McAfee show, hey, look, this is probably it for me. But you could tell near the end of the season that things were starting to change for him. And we asked him actually leading into that Ravens game about his future. And I kind of expected him to say, like, look, I've got a do or die, make or break game right here against the Ravens. That's all I'm talking about. That's all I care about. We'll focus on the future in the future. But he actually didn't. He entertained the question. And he said, like, look, I'm 42 years old. I'm going to be a free agent, and I'm going to have some options. And he kind of like laughed and corrected himself. He's like, well, I don't know about options, but I'll have maybe one or two. And when he said that, to me, it seemed like he was leaning towards coming back. And immediately two things came into my head. Number one, he's going to come back to the Steelers. Or number two, he's going to go to the Minnesota Vikings and join Kevin O'Connell, who he has connection with. And when Mike Tomlin stepped down, I think a lot of people thought that had shut the door for Aaron Rodgers. And even the owner and team president, Art Rooney, said, look, he came here to play for Mike Tomlin, so I think it's certainly going to affect his decision. But now the situation, the dynamic has dramatically changed for Pittsburgh. By bringing in Mike McCarthy, I think that they've completely reopened and flung that door wide open for Aaron Rodgers. And in his introductory press conference, Mike McCarthy was asked about Aaron Rodgers, and I expect him to kind of dance around the question, and he answered it pretty definitively. He said, yeah, I definitely would like Aaron Rodgers back. So it seems that that's where things are headed, but now the ball is obviously in Aaron Rodgers' court, and he has to decide what he wants to do, and the Steelers have to decide once again, how long are they willing to wait for him? I would think that the first deadline would be free agency if they want to explore something like Malik Willis. Or, he's really the main guy that you can even consider. Or if they're interested in going for a quarterback, I don't know that you would even need an answer from Rodgers, because really the one guy that would be within their range would be Ty Simpson. And really the report on him is he only started for 1 year and could use a year to sit behind a veteran like Aaron. So, yeah, to answer your question, we kind of are where we were last year, where we're sitting around waiting for Aaron Rodgers to make a decision again.
Well, I know one thing. There's only one person on this show that has not covered Joe Flacco.
I'm actually not that convinced that, like, last year with Joe Flacco and Mike Tomlin, I think it probably would have been the same thing. And I think, like, with Mason Rudolph, it might have been something similar. Like, the Steelers just always are this 9-8, 10-7 team that barely gets in the playoffs, doesn't belong to be there, and gets smoked in the first round. And I think that's kind of the problem. I know that everyone's probably not here to hear a dissertation on Aaron Rodgers, but I think that's kind of the problem with Rodgers if you bring him back. Like, he might be the best of the bad options for the second consecutive year, but he also probably isn't good enough to push you over the top to be anything more than a 10-7 team that probably is going to lose in the first round of the playoffs when you face a really good defense with a great pass rush, because he just has such a hard cap. Like, he still has the brain to do it. His arm talent is still unquestionable, but he can barely move, and he has to orchestrate this offense that just relies on him being perfect, basically, and no negative plays. And when you face a good defense, it's just not going to happen.
It's almost like what I felt on the McCarthy hire. He keeps their floor high, but does he do anything to change like that whole pattern that they seemingly in? I mean, when you asked the question in Whiparound, Paul, I was like, okay, I didn't mind the Mike McCarthy hire. He keeps the floor high, but what else that's why I have a hard. It just felt like that hire was exactly right up the Steelers' alley.
I think the Steelers were thinking that it was going to play really well to a fan base. Hey, we're bringing back the Pittsburgh guy. Like, come on, let's all have a Permane Brothers sandwich in Iron City and celebrate. But instead, fans were kind of like, what are you doing? Why did you just bring us another Mike Tomlin? Like fans were so eager for something new and fresh that they were willing to fail if that's what it took. And I think it's similar with the quarterback where they would be willing like to tolerate a 5-win season if it means getting the answer in the 2027 draft. They're kind of in a very opposite end of the spectrum, kind of like these Browns fans that we're talking about that like they're kind of, some people might say spoiled, but they're just kind of sick of this mediocrity, good enough to be in the conversation, but never actually a contender that they're in right now. And I just don't know that they're going to get out of it this season. I agree that Mike McCarthy probably keeps their floor high, but I don't know that he really necessarily raises that ceiling.
So I'm glad you brought up Flacco. We could talk about him for an hour and we joke about it. But here's the reality of the situation. If you lay out the top free agent quarterbacks as of this moment, he's the second best one. Like if you want to win games in 2026, right? And the guy's like 53 years old. So that's scary. Now that can change because we don't know what's going to happen with some other guys with Kyler and whatever. And that is, it's fascinating for Pittsburgh, for everyone. I didn't think the Browns were going to be in on Malik Willis. I thought the Browns would sit tight with Shador, with Watson as the absolute last resort fallback because he has to be on the team, and kind of explore their draft options knowing they're probably a year away in most areas. But I don't know how many realistic suitors there are for Malik Willis when you add the teams that have cap room, a team like the Dolphins that's nowhere close. And if Pittsburgh's not in it, if the Jets aren't in it, we don't know where these teams are, right? And that it's a hell of a place for Pittsburgh to be. I agree, Mike. You summed it up well. Like Rodgers gives you a chance to have that stability, and that stability is exactly what everybody on the outside no longer wants. Right. And you go back to Week 17, like the Myles Garrett thing took on a life of its own, but Aaron Rodgers just was not good enough. That offense was not good enough that day to attack the Browns.
Well, and that was a microcosm of like what his season was. Like when they faced good defenses, there was a large enough sample size that basically every time he was really poor. And every time that they played like an average to below average, he was good to even great. And this is the problem with like aging quarterbacks. You still see the flashes and then you get intoxicated by them and convince yourselves that they can still do it. And so when he rips the ball over the middle, fits it into a tight window, you're like, that's Aaron Rodgers. That's the guy. That's the MVP we remember. But it just doesn't happen frequently enough. And there's other parts of his game that have diminished that you're just, giving yourself a chance to be mediocre, be 10-7, be 9-8. But what does that really get you in the long run?
There's still 2 star quarterbacks in this league, which is good. And I'm curious where Lamar's at, because you mentioned it, you sort of talked about the relationship between Lamar and Monken and Harbaugh. Is this viewed as much as a reset for Lamar to get him back and to shake off whatever was wrong last year, injury or otherwise, as it is anything else? And how does Declan Doyle in his first time calling plays play into this as well for him? I'm curious what the Lamar factor in Baltimore is right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, John Harbaugh's camp, Todd Monken's camp, a few people that are close to Lamar, I guess. You never know. He really has no inner circle. They've all defended the fact that these guys were fine and everything was okay. And look, I think these guys weren't butting heads daily. There's not a dislike. They just weren't on the same page. And it had kind of become, I think it wore on the whole team last year. Well, look, and when you don't know when your quarterback is going to practice or if he's going to play, that's problematic in this league, especially if you're as Lamar-centric as the Ravens have been. So, yes, I think you said the right word, Paul. This is a reset for Lamar Jackson. And the team, the organization, the higher-ups feel like he needs it. They feel like a new voice will really do him some good. A healthy offseason will do him some good. And I think one thing we've already seen this offseason is they're being more vocal about Lamar. They've just for a couple of years now, and I think it was to the detriment. John Harbaugh has protected him. He hasn't wanted to say anything about him. He hasn't wanted to offend him. I'm not sure that helped very much. They've really walked on eggshells around all things Lamar, and I don't think that did them any good. But we've already heard Bisciotti say, look, we're going to try to sign him to a contract extension, and if we don't, we're adding void years, and he's going to be our quarterback this year, and we're going to significantly shrink his cap number by adding these void years. So there's no ambiguity there. I know there's a lot of talk about Pro Football Talk. It seems to be a weekly topic about could the Raiders make the Ravens an offer for Lamar? Could all these teams jump in?
Well, hold on. I saw a tweet though. That has to mean something. What did he do? He retweeted a kid that was wearing a Ravens jersey or something.
And then he apologized, said he just saw a kid wearing a Ravens jersey and he thought it was cool. So you never know.
We're in that part of the year, aren't we?
Yeah, yeah. But I think I just feel like they've been upfront about it and they're not avoiding it anymore. It was way too much. Lack of transparency about it at times, and you have to be that way. They have to deal directly with Lamar. There's no agent to help them out in any of these contract things and to soften it. So you understand the sensitivity, but they weren't in a great place last year, and they're being really upfront about it. And it's been a clear priority from Bisciotti to DeCosta to Jesse Minter to Declan Doyle to communicate with Lamar. He was in on all the interviews. He talked to the quarterback coach before they hired him. He was involved with Declan Doyle. He spoke to him for over an hour during the interview process. He was in on the head coaching interviews. They have him engaged. He's into this. They're making it clear that he has a significant say in this, and they feel like that should help when it comes down to really trying to hammer out this contract, and he should be much more engaged, energized by the whole situation.
The Bengals are taking notes right now. I think what are these void years and what is it restruct? Were you talking about change? You can change their contract to clear space. They should be taking notes about that, which who knows if they'll actually go that route. But it's kind of this, it's similar where everyone walks on eggshells around Burrow too. But all the fans are like, yes, everyone walk on eggshells. We think we have a better chance with this guy influencing decisions than the actual decision makers doing.
Probably.
Right. And I think there's something to that. And he has. I mean, he's changed the way they've made decisions around here in recent years. And his lack of happiness, whether he says it was because he had a bad day at a press conference in December or not, has major influence inside of the building. And he called this free agency period paramount, because he knows, like everybody on earth with eyeballs knows, that they have to actually go get after this defense in free agency. But I think he's he's certainly done more than just lay the groundwork on, if I'm not happy here, I don't plan on staying here. And he gave next year and said, I'm good. Like they're all in. But it's like when I said in the beginning here, this being a pressure cooker year for the whole team, it's because Burrow kind of sets that temperature. Like, I'll give you this year. You better prove that you can put a team around me and we can win, because me and my buddies Jamar and T might not want to stick around for watching you guys, hobble through this thing and not be able to make anything work. So it's.
But didn't he kind of set the tone for that? Didn't he want these guys? Like, they surrounded him with wide receivers. Most teams are not going to pay two guys that kind of money. They gave him what they wanted, and they're like, here, go put up 1 million points for us. And then what? He's critical that they didn't also put a defense around him.
Yeah. Well, did you have Katie Blackburn's burner over there? Because I think he gave you what you wanted, Joe. I think the problem there's, without getting too deep into the weeds, the botching of the Trey Hendrickson situation here is the root of all evil. There's nothing wrong with doing T and Jamar and having Joe as your stars in your face. That's fine. But you can't screw up and pay another guy $30 million and not get anything out of him, or not trade him and leave your defense depleted of any depth. And when he is mad at you and fights you and gets hurt and doesn't play the rest of the year, all of a sudden it's beyond toxic and you have no one that can do anything on the defensive side of the ball, and you didn't build the team around him. So I think Joe would have been Joe's message was always the same. It was, I want Jamar is a need, T is a need, Trey's a need. Like, I felt like he always was like, if you want Trey, we could keep Trey, but I could do without it. He just wants a good defense. He doesn't care. He doesn't want to feel like he has to be perfect and score 42 or more every single week, like we've seen so often where it's just not enough. And so I think he's in a good enough place. They just need to win again. The dude wants to win. That's all. I mean, that's really the root of it. And he wants to win, and he's scored 1 million points here and keeps losing and getting hurt, and it's very frustrating. But I think this is their best shot to win by going forward with everything that they know and hit the ground running this year, and we'll see. So that sets me up for where I want to wrap this. Let's rank the North. Obviously 1 million things are going to change between now and when they start playing the games and during the games. But with all this change, where does it sit? Who do you feel best about? Give me your rankings of who you feel best about in this division and maybe why. Zach, I'll start with you.
Well, I think every year you think if Joe stays healthy and the Bengals play a little bit of defense, that they're as good as anybody, right? And it's just those things haven't happened, or they haven't connected for whatever reason. I am genuinely guessing, like everyone else is, on are the Browns going to be as aggressive as they can be and try to be much better with this defense right away, or are they going to play for 27, right, and just draft 10 guys or maybe even add draft picks for the next 2 and move forward? I don't know. I think the Browns are clearly fourth because of the quarterback situation, because of the offense. I mean, the Browns are watching maybe 6 veteran offensive linemen walk out the door. And a couple of them, it's like, okay, see ya. But they didn't draft any offensive linemen last year. So this is a problem. But I mean, everybody knows that this Browns defense might have been the best unit in the division last year. It has the most dominant player in several years, and it has other really good guys who are in their prime and would be stars on any other team. And frankly, don't get their due as stars nationally because the Browns have won 8 games the last 2 years. So, I'm intrigued as hell by the Baltimore coaching moves and upgrades. I'm always interested in the Bengals. I think the Browns lost one free win when they lost Mike Tomlin because he couldn't win in Cleveland for whatever reason. But, if the Steelers stumble into something at quarterback and or wide receiver, they could win this division. So, like I said, I feel comfortable saying that the Browns are fourth, but I don't feel comfortable firmly predicting what they're going to do about it. And we know that there are some pieces that are good. Like 10 years ago, this was a Browns roster with no pieces. This is a Browns roster now that has some damn good pieces.
What about you, Mike?
I think the only thing I feel comfortable saying is that the Browns will finish last. Sorry to the Browns fans and also to Zach, who has to cover them every week. I think beyond that, the Steelers, they had an opportunity here when their coach stepped down to hit the reset button. And as I mentioned before, there was an appetite for that in Pittsburgh, but they've given no indication of that. And in fact, I think they might try to push the gas pedal a little bit harder and continue to try to go for it this year, keep their aging core on defense, add a couple pieces, add a wide receiver maybe, add an old quarterback probably. And I think that's probably going to get them around competing for the division near the end and be maybe second. I feel like they are the team that's probably going to finish second. And if things go their way, maybe they could win it. But one of the other 2 teams with the star quarterback and the high ceiling I think is going to be the favorite to win the division. And then if they actually get in, a team that could actually compete for something more than just their first playoff win in a decade, which would be the Steelers Super Bowl, in the banner that they would hang would be, we finally won our first playoff game in a decade. But I just feel like that's what the Steelers are working with right now. For the Steelers, things to go right. They had for the 4th consecutive year last year, they had the NFL's highest paid defense. They're still going to be one of the highest paid defenses. Bringing in Patrick Graham as the new defensive coordinator, he's going to need that old core to play up to its potential. Then you're counting on the offense to basically take just a little bit of a step forward by adding some pieces, especially wide receiver. That's really the ceiling that you're talking about when you're talking about the Steelers.
Yeah, I really like Todd Monken, and I felt like he should have gotten a head coaching job And I know he did interviews, but he should have gotten a head coaching job when the Ravens had arguably the best offense in the sport, at least in some metrics, the previous 2 years. And the 1 year where he went to the AFC Championship game, obviously that didn't help his candidacy because the Seahawks were willing to wait for Mike McDonald. I don't think he was a strong enough candidate for other teams to want to wait. But what I worry about and I've told Zach this, is he can be a little bit of a red ass, as they say in baseball parlance, and he's a fiery dude. He does not have a whole lot of appetite for nonsense, and as Zach will tell you, that job comes with its share of nonsense. And I think we'll see. Everybody's talked about how his first experience in Cleveland wasn't great. I think we'll see how much he's matured as a coach, being around Kirby Smart and John Harbaugh and all that, and how he deals with that situation. There's no doubt they have pieces. They give Ravens hard time every year, regardless of where the game is. But yeah, you can't put them anywhere but fourth at this point, given the state of their quarterback position and the offensive line. I do. I like the Ravens to rebound because I think Jesse Minter will fix that defense. And I still have faith in Lamar Jackson being a star quarterback, rebounding from some of the injuries. I think he'll take some of the criticism personally. I think he will be more engaged than we've seen, because everybody knows now John Harbaugh is not a shield for everybody else. John Harbaugh deserves some criticism. He also took a lot of criticism that he probably didn't deserve, and that sheltered some other guys from it, whether that's DaCosta, whether it's Lamar or other guys. So I think now Lamar will be motivated. I think he knows this is a huge year for him to kind of push back on some of the criticism that he's in decline. And I think Minter will fix that defense. And they have a lot of draft picks as usual. They're in a better cap situation than they've been in a few years, so they can be a little bit more aggressive. I think DaCosta will be under fire a little bit, and he made some mistakes last offseason. I think he'll be motivated to sort of be more aggressive and correct those. So I would put them first, but I could make a case for three teams, and none of that. Zach said it best: if Burrow's healthy and they just make moderate improvements to the defense, it's tough to not suggest that they're the best team going forward, especially with the continuity with the coaching and all that. But I think just looking at it now, and we'll have this conversation again, I'm sure, after the draft and free agency and what teams do and who comes and goes. But I just think with Lamar and Minter's ability to fix that defense, I would put them at the head of the class as of now.
Yeah, I just wish that there was a clearer path for Pittsburgh and Cleveland fans to a quarterback solvent. Like that's just, it's in another year, and maybe it shows itself. Like I don't know, but I would feel far more comfortable, saying that either of those teams could come up and compete. And recognize that Rodgers won this division last year, but like to not say it's going to be who is the healthiest of Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson in 2026 feels like the question, because both of these guys have had those problems, and whatever that looks like, it just feels like if one of those guys is healthy and truly playing their best, that's who's going to win this division right now. And I always just keep using, because you could only do one thing, and that's go wrong by betting against Joe Burrow. I'm just not going to bet against Joe Burrow. Like, the dude's won multiple comeback player of the year awards, and I think he wants to win another one. I think he's going to say that last year wasn't his comeback and he could maybe go win it again, because he seems at his best in these situations. Like when people have forgotten about him, when people have counted him out, when he's maybe had a down year, or he's not in, if he drops in Sando's tears or something like that, like that is when you have seen the best Joe Burrow emerge. And I feel like he's channeling it for this to be the year for that, with so many pieces that he knows and is comfortable with in place, and feels like he's a little forgotten. He's going to come out pissed off. If he does that and plays great and they still lose, then it's dynamite time around here. But it feels like you're going to get the best Joe Burrow. It's just a matter of if that Joe Burrow can stay healthy. And we'll see and that's really the question around everything Bengals. Like, it doesn't matter. They proved it again this year, and it's been the case since he's been here. Like, if he's not good, if he's not healthy, it's over. Everything runs through him, and he's proven to have injury issues. So if he stays healthy, they're interesting. But I'm with you. I think it's just I'd flip a coin between the Ravens and the Bengals right now. If only there were a clearer path to fixing the quarterback in the other two places, I would, you would say it feels maybe a little more open. But hey, that's what the next couple months are for, right? To change everything. Everything's going to change. It's hope season, Zach. It's hope season.
Yeah. Well, I honestly think one thing that's going to happen in Cleveland and Pittsburgh, at least for the discussion, is that Garrett Nussmeier is going to create some momentum here. He got hurt. He had an awful year. Dane Brugler and others swear he would have been a first-round pick maybe before Jackson Dart last year. So maybe he creates some momentum. And maybe the Browns at 39 or even trading back from 24 or even at 24 end up with Garrett Nussmeier. And he gets hot and they ride that defense. And then Flacco comes in for the Steelers. And week 18 in Heinz Field, it's Nussmeier and Flacco for the division. Well, Lamar and Burrow have been hurt since Thanksgiving.
Well, and his dad, Doug Nussmeier, coached with Mike McCarthy in Dallas. He was his quarterback's coach. So there have been already connections and connecting of dots. But in Pittsburgh, it's more so third round if he's able to slip into the third round. But I think knowing the Browns, they'll probably find a way to get him and another quarterback within the middle rounds.
Yeah, knock it out.
You guys can see me aging in real time as if you haven't seen that for the last 20 fucking years.
I do have one really important question to wrap us up here, Zach, and that is, if Miami, Ohio doesn't win the MAC tournament, should they still get into the NCAA?
They should. This is real podcast talk, Paul. That's a great tease. You're such a pro.
Let's
go.
The
rest of us are just amateurs. So let's get on and talk about that, because I have my tickets for the MAC final, and I'm fully expecting it Miami and Akron. I'm fully expecting it to be a hot ticket too.
So are you not meeting me in Athens for the regular season finale when the Bobcats kill that perfect record of the Miami Red Hawks?
I'm going to be unable to do that, but I will meet you in Cleveland for the final.
Okay. Yeah. OU's not making it to any finals, but I will be watching regardless.
Yes.
Guys, this was awesome. This was fun. I'm glad we did it. We'll have to do it again another time. I hope everybody listens to all of these gentlemen's podcasts and reads all the coverage on The Athletic, because it's as good as it gets. And keep reading The Whip. It comes out all the time. So we got a new one out now. All right. Thanks, you guys. Appreciate the time.
See you guys Monday.
See you.